Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Heartfulness Way, Heart-Based Meditations for Spiritual Transformation by Kamlesh D. Patel and Joshua Pollock. Forward by Varun Soni. Afterward by James R. Doty. Narrated by Assaf Cohen. Forward. My parents were born and raised in India, where they met and fell in love while in medical school. However, they dreamed of a different life for themselves and their future family, and so upon graduating from medical school, they bravely moved to the United States. I was born a few years after that as part of the first generation of ethnically Indian Hindus raised in the United States. When my parents moved to the United States, they were still young medical residents, but in just a few short years, they went from new immigrants struggling to support themselves to new physicians struggling to support not only themselves, but also their children, their siblings, and their parents. Through their extraordinary work ethic and dedication to family, my parents eventually flourished in their careers, and I grew up as the direct beneficiary of their American dream, enjoying the many privileges and resources that they worked so hard to attain. But even as my parents achieved all the traditional markers of success, salary, status, and security, they realized that making a living did not always equate to making a life. Indeed, making a life also requires one to focus on the art of living, on loving relationships, emotional intelligence, and a sense of meaning and purpose. In many ways, my parents' journey reflects Abraham Maslow's famous hierarchy of needs theory, which postulates that only after sustenance, security, and community are established can one achieve self-actualization. While on her spiritual journey, my mother encountered heartfulness and began her practice in earnest. She soon became a heartfulness trainer and served as a meditation facilitator within the tradition, and she hosted people in our house every Sunday morning for meditation and fellowship. Now, more than 30 years later, more than a dozen of my family members regularly practice heartfulness, and my grandmother and my first cousin's wife joined my mother as trainers. Even though I was still a child at the time, I remember a significant shift in the energy and vibrations within our house after my mother began leading heartfulness groups there. Indeed, our house became a home, and the normal tensions and anxieties of family life seemed to suddenly subside. Just as I was a beneficiary of my parents' professional and financial success, I became a beneficiary of my mother's spiritual aspirations and values. I believe that being raised in that environment directly led to the scholarly and spiritual work I do today as the Dean of Religious Life at the University of Southern California. Heartfulness is based on the ancient Indian spiritual practice of Raja Yoga, which recognizes that as sentient beings, our nature is inherently divine, and that the path to self-realization is inward, internal, and introspective. Heartfulness offers a meditation technique that cultivates and nourishes the divine light that burns in each of our hearts, thereby cleansing us of our accumulated negative and afflictive emotions and experiences. In this way, heartfulness translates the timeless spiritual truths of India into a timely spiritual practice for the here and now. In the spiritual traditions of India, a guru, or spiritual teacher, serves as a guide and mentor for one's spiritual journey, in much the same way that a professor, coach, or instructor might for academic, athletic, and artistic endeavors. For the heartfulness tradition, the spiritual guide is Kamlesh D. Patel, affectionately known as Daajii. But unlike the gurus of ancient India, Daajii is not an ascetic, a monk, a renunciate, a mendicant, nor an itinerant. Rather, he is a householder, a scientist, a father, a grandfather, and a husband. And therefore his articulation of heartfulness is not just a theoretical construct, but an integrative and applied approach of practical spirituality for everyday living. The Heartfulness Way beautifully highlights the living tradition of Raja Yoga and the vision of Daajii. It is an elegant and eloquent introduction to heartfulness, a profound meditative practice that has positively transformed my family. I hope it does the same for you and yours. Varun Soni, Ph.D., Dean of Religious Life, Vice Provost of Campus Wellness and Crisis Intervention, University of Southern California. Preface. We never know what life has in store for us, what is just around the corner, and that is part and parcel of the mystery and beauty of living. I have received many blessings during my 6 decades on this earth, and one of those happened while I was a teenager, studying pharmacy in Ahmedabad in India in 1976. Thanks to one of my college pals, I came across Heartfulness meditation, and a few months later was face to face with a remarkable man who immediately became my first guru, who guided me in this practice. His name was Ramchandra, and we called him Babuji. The effect of the very first Heartfulness meditation on me was so profound that it was clear I had found my direction and anchor in life. But the effect of meeting Babuji was beyond even that, something so precious and subtle in its essence that it defies description. While universes and dimensions have opened in my inner world since that time, it is only one aspect of what has unfolded during these last 4 decades. What is even more wonderful is the wealth of everyday qualities that have come through Heartfulness practice. Qualities such as love, acceptance, humility, service, compassion, empathy, and a higher purpose to existence. It all starts with a simple act of meditation. Nothing much is required of us as we sit quietly, close our eyes, and focus within on the source of all existence in our hearts. If we can approach that act of meditation with childlike wonder and innocence, our inner universe unfolds before us naturally. In a heart-based meditation practice, we explore and experience the simplest and purest aspect of our existence, our soul. Everything about it is so natural. The Heartfulness practices in this book nurture our souls, remove the weeds and mud that keep them hidden, and set free that spark of childlike innocence and wonder that makes life truly meaningful. At the same time, we have to live in the day-to-day world of urban stress, wages and mortgages, careers and relationships. Heartfulness practices help us simplify our responses and navigate our daily lives in an enriching, fulfilling manner. If you knew there was a practical way to transcend suffering and fly into the sky of hope and contentment, would you be interested? That is exactly what Heartfulness offers, not by removing problems or by shutting them out, but by transforming us from the inside out so that we see the world in a new way, without the filters of our limitations. In the Heartfulness way, we explore and expand our consciousness, and even go beyond consciousness to uncover true potentiality. I hope you enjoy this book and benefit from what I have learned on this journey of life so far. Kamlesh D. Patel, June 2018. Introduction. In August 2015, as I sat in my home office in Chennai, India, my wife appeared with my phone. "It's Kamlesh, calling from Europe," she said, laughing. Apparently, our 2-year-old daughter had answered the phone and held her own conversation with him for some time before my wife noticed. When I picked up the phone, he said, "I would like you to write a book about meditation." I immediately agreed, but I also had a little trepidation. Because Kamlesh has been meditating for over 40 years and is a spiritual guide to seekers all over the world, I felt he was far more qualified to write a book on this subject. When we met weeks later, I said, "Maybe you should write this book instead." He laughed and replied, "We'll write it together." Over the course of 2 years, we had numerous wide-ranging discussions in locations throughout India and the United States. The Heartfulness Way chronicles those conversations. About 20 years earlier, a fascination with books prompted my interest in meditation. As a teenager, I found myself drawn to the subject of spirituality. I was sure that if I searched long enough through my parents' enormous book collection, I would find some obscure and esoteric text, and from its pages, all the great secrets of the universe would pour out. First, I encountered the Tao Te Ching, penned by the eminent sage Lao Tzu, supposedly at the point of a spear. It mesmerized me with its simplicity and wisdom, and fanned the flames of spiritual craving in my heart. This led me to other books. I pored through the literature of the Buddhists, Taoists, Sufis, Christians, and others. I read Aristotle and Augustine, Emerson and Epicurus. Gradually it dawned on me that through all my reading, I had only learned about the experiences and ideas of others. What about my own? Until this point, All my knowledge was abstract. I had become familiar with so many spiritual ideas, but in a bookish way. I had come across so many terms: enlightenment, satori, samadhi, illumination. I needed to find out on my own what these concepts meant, and I knew that this required a practical approach. I embarked on a mad dash through various practices. I took meditation classes, tried yoga, and studied martial arts. Once I met a famous Zen master. When he looked at me, I only managed to stammer, "I've never met a master before." "But you will," he replied. By then I was already meditating on a daily basis. However, I did not find meditation to be gratifying. It was a real struggle, a difficult and tedious affair. After a few years of searching, my enthusiasm started to wane. Eventually, I gave up my quest, empty-handed and a little disillusioned. In August 2002, I met a stranger while standing outside a local shop. In the course of our conversation, I learned that she practiced a form of meditation known alternately as Sahaj Marg, which means natural path in Hindi, and Heartfulness. She spoke as if the practice of Heartfulness had really changed her life. Despite my curiosity about this new kind of meditation, I was also a little skeptical. By now I had become immune to the various claims made about meditation. My own experience of meditation had been different. Perhaps I just wasn't cut out to meditate, I thought. Additionally, I suspected that a true path might not be found so easily. I wondered whether finding a capable teacher might involve trekking deep into the Himalayas or traveling to some other remote locale. What are the odds of finding something authentic during a chance encounter on the street? But something else inside me said, it's possible. Then, one bright September morning, my mother called me. She was in tears. My little sister had just been in a car accident. She was unconscious and on her way to the hospital. Nobody knew if she would live or die, and I was halfway across the country. I could do nothing. Toward midnight, my sister was dead at the age of 16. These are the times when people tend to seek meaning, spirituality, and hope. But I had already done that and come up empty. Nevertheless, I set up a meeting with a Heartfulness trainer named Brian Jones. Brian is a professional artist. We met at his studio, which was filled with paintings in varying stages of completion. Over coffee, I was impressed to learn that all Heartfulness trainers are volunteers, that none of them accept any fee for their service. Brian then invited me into an adjacent room to meditate, or to give me a sitting, as he called it. He motioned me to a chair and took the seat across from me. He explained how to meditate on the heart and said that his role would simply be to meditate along with me, and that this would help facilitate my own meditation. He then asked me to close my eyes and said, "Please start." It is difficult to explain what followed. It wasn't until much later that I understood that I had experienced a glimpse of samadhi, a state of profound inner equanimity, where you drift beyond yourself, beyond the here and now, beyond everything. When he broke the meditation by saying, "That's all," I felt as if I had been yanked out of eternity. Quietly, we sat in the post-meditative stillness, enjoying its languid beauty. In that moment, I knew that I had experienced something unique, something for which I had been thirsting my whole life. I did not know what that something was, but for the first time in memory, my heart was absolutely joyful and at peace. Later, I would learn that this experience was brought about by something called yogic transmission. Heartfulness is an integrated approach that consists of 3 core practices: meditation, cleaning, and prayer. These 3 practices are supported by yogic transmission, which is the essence of the Heartfulness approach and the key to its transformative potential. Through meditation, we move from the complexity of mind to the simplicity of heart. Everything starts with the heart. When the heart is at peace, the mind is at rest. When the heart is content, the mind gains insight, clarity, and wisdom. We often think that the heart and mind are 2 distinct entities that are often in conflict with one another. In Heartfulness meditation, we use the heart to regulate the mind, thus bringing them both into alignment. The 2 entities unite in meditative togetherness, and we become integrated. The cleaning method frees us from the various mental and emotional tendencies that often dominate our lives. Through it, we purify our hearts by removing inner heaviness, base qualities, and desires. Gradually, our authentic nature is revealed. In prayer, we affirm our connection to the spiritual source within. The act of prayer further evolves into a state of prayerfulness, which beckons us to unite with that source. It creates an aspiration and a craving that resolves itself in profound meditation. The heartfulness practice emerged in India in the early 20th century. Its progenitor was a yogi named Ramchandra, whom people called Daajii. From the very beginning, Daajii set a tone of inclusiveness, accepting students from any religious and social background, which was rare for his time and place. He himself was steeped in various traditions, which he synthesized and innovated to create a path that could serve an increasingly modernized humanity. Modern seekers have numerous responsibilities and are not equipped to devote themselves exclusively to their spiritual aspirations. Heartfulness proposes a balanced, integrated existence, where life's spiritual and material wings can harmoniously coexist. Daajji's spiritual successor was also named Ramchandra, but was commonly known as Babuji. Babuji perfected the heartfulness practice, bringing it into its present form and guiding seekers around the world. Babuji's successor was Parthasarathi Rajagopalachari, Daajii, the third guide of the heartfulness way. When Daajii passed away on December 20, 2014, Kamlesh became the fourth guide in the heartfulness lineage. It was my good fortune to have numerous interactions with Daajii when I relocated to India for work in 2008. When I first met him, I immediately remembered what the Zen master had foretold years earlier. However, I would later come to understand that meeting the master is something that happens within, rather than externally. While living in India, I also met Kamlesh, who was my neighbor and the father of one of my friends. I quickly developed great respect and affection for him. He was one of the most authentic and down-to-earth individuals I had ever known. I remember one instance when his son remarked that one of our apartment complex's security guards always seemed unhappy. "Maybe he would benefit from meditation," he said to his father. Kamlesh replied, "Right now, that man needs bread more than he needs God." Kamlesh was born in the northwestern Indian state of Gujarat in 1956. He started heartfulness practice in 1976 while a student at pharmacy college. After graduating, he moved to the United States and worked as a pharmacist in New York City while continuing his meditation practice. In 2011, Daajii formally nominated him as his spiritual successor, which came to fruition on the sad day of Daajji's passing. Since then, Kamlesh has completely devoted himself to his spiritual duties, which include guiding the activities of Heartfulness Institute and offering continuous support to seekers from every corner of the world. He eschews all formal titles, but many people refer to him as Daajii, which means father's younger brother in his native Gujarati. The Heartfulness Way is a series of candid conversations between Daajii and me, in which we explore the practice and principles of heartfulness. In these conversations, I ask Daajii many questions. Some are questions that I had as a beginner in meditation. Others are questions that I have often been asked in my capacity as a heartfulness trainer. Still others are questions that sprang naturally to my mind in the course of our discussions. The Heartfulness Way consists of 3 parts. Part 1 examines the nature of the spiritual search and demystifies meditation and yogic transmission. Part 2 introduces the core practices of heartfulness: meditation, cleaning, and prayer. It blends foundational knowledge and practical instruction. Each chapter concludes with a step-by-step guide to lead you through these simple practices. There is also guided audio of 3 practices available for download at newharbinger.com/41344. Part 3 is a discussion about the Guru's invisible yet vital role in supporting our inner journey. The Heartfulness Way is an invitation to experience the simple practice that has transformed my life and those of others practicing heartfulness around the world. Of course, no book can ever transform us. A book may give us wisdom, but it cannot make us wise. A book can give us knowledge, but it cannot make us experience the truth of that knowledge. What this book offers is an experiential method that has helped many individuals discover that truth for themselves. We may seek spirituality in various places, but the spiritual source can never be found externally. It is a presence that can never be grasped, but only felt. When we do, it is with the heart that we feel it, for the heart is the organ of feeling. To practice heartfulness is to seek the essence beyond the form. It is to seek the reality behind the ritual. It is to center oneself in the core of one's heart and find true meaning and contentment there. Daajii's message to seekers is simple and direct. Experience is greater than knowledge. Any good teacher understands this. That is why so many classes have both a lecture and a laboratory module. Daajii often says that in the lecture, you learn the principles, but in the lab, you experiment and gain practical experience. I invite you to make your own heart your lab, and the practice of heartfulness your experiment. In any experiment, there is an experimenter, there is a subject to be experimented upon, and there is a result. In the spiritual experiment, all three roles belong to you. You are the experimenter, you are the subject of the experiment, and you are its result. With such an experiment, there is never any finality, but only an ongoing process of discovery. That is the joy and wonder of heartfulness. Joshua Pollock, June 2018. Part 1. Why Heartfulness? 1. The Seeker's Journey. Entering Daajii's apartment in Chennai, India, I found him relaxing on an indoor swing. As I walked toward him, a warm smile appeared on his face. "What's up, brother?" he said, extending his hand to shake mine. I sat across from him. A relative appeared from the next room and offered me tea. Daajii intervened. "Give him coffee," he said. "He'll enjoy it more." It was the truth. The first thing people often notice about Daajii is his poise. It is a rare quality which seems to touch anyone in his presence. His words are well placed and deliberate. Generally, he says only what is necessary to convey the bare essence. It then becomes incumbent upon the listener to further explore and expand the idea. Periods of silence often punctuate his speech. In such moments, a person can understand many things that are even more important than his teachings. In this situation, a questioner tends to become inwardly content and forget all their questions. As Daajii's interviewer, this was now my fear. However, I instead found a new dynamic emerging between us. Our conversation flowed unabated, and he answered every question enthusiastically and in great depth. "So, you're here with questions," said Daajii. "Yes, but I'll start with just one," I said. "Why meditate?" "Why not?" he replied with a chuckle. "Well, each person's reason will be different. In life, our goals tend to correspond to our personal needs and tastes. For instance, one person joins a gym in order to lose weight. Another person wants six-pack abs. Yet both visit the same gym. I have observed a pattern in my interactions with meditators around the globe. Initially, people tend to approach meditative practice with a wide spectrum of aims. For example, many people suffer from a stressful lifestyle. They want to find a way to relax. Someone else wants to reduce blood pressure. Another person seeks mental clarity. Others want emotional balance. But when they start meditation, they soon begin to harvest benefits that far exceed these aims. Often, people are surprised to report a profound sense of spiritual well-being, a state reflected by the presence of inner joy and even bliss. It is as if a hungry person asks for a small scrap of food, but then someone surprises them with a banquet. What's more, these results are palpable and immediate. We can experience them after a single meditation. In that case, what would happen if you meditated a second and a third time? Imagine the cumulative effect of numerous meditations. But does meditation also address our original aims? I asked. It addresses them without specifically targeting them, he said. Meditation simply normalizes your inner state, whatever it may be. A stressed person may meditate and say, meditation relaxes you. A person with disturbed emotions may meditate and say, meditation calms your emotions. An angry and bitter person may meditate and say, meditation opens your heart. It makes you loving. Hearing these varied responses can confuse us. What does meditation actually do? We think to ourselves. So what does it do? I asked. It creates naturalness, said Daajii. As you proceed toward naturalness, that which is unnatural in you starts to disappear. There may be 1,000 varieties of unnaturalness, but there is only one naturalness. Attaining that, we resolve 1,000 complaints. Why meditate? The answer is complex because our goals change as we progress. Today's reason is different from tomorrow's, and that is as it should be. As we meditate, wisdom grows. We better understand what we are and what we should be, and meditation is the vehicle that takes us on this infinite journey. If the journey is infinite, can we ever arrive? I asked. Where? He said with a laugh. The moment you think, yes, I have made it, you stop growing. You stop moving. Evolution can never stop. We must always be willing to change. We must be ready to go to the next step, whatever it may be. Then, having reached that step, we must be prepared and flexible enough to go even further. But spiritual literature is replete with examples of figures who were supposedly perfect beings, I said. Do you think they would describe themselves in such a way? He asked. In mathematics, there is something called an asymptote. It's a line that is approached by a curve which intersects the line at infinity. That curve moves infinitely closer to the line, but the two never meet. They only get closer and closer. A highly advanced aspirant is like that curve. She forever approaches the destination without ever arriving. At any given moment, she is both infinitely close and infinitely far from the goal. Yet she keeps moving. As long as the aspirant exists, the journey will be infinite. What are we moving toward? I asked. From selfishness toward selflessness, he said. From the reactive mind to the responsive heart. From imprisonment in the folds of ego to freedom from ego. From the here and now to eternal, timeless existence. From worshipping forms to formlessness, from contraction to expansion, from restlessness to peacefulness, from the superficial to the authentic, from insistence to acceptance, from imbalance to balance, from darkness to light, from heaviness to lightness, from grossness to subtlety, from the periphery to the core of the being, the source, the higher self. You see, the purpose of meditation is to transform us. Transformation is the purpose of religion, too. It is also the purpose of self-help and psychiatry. Yet, whenever we try to change ourselves in any way, we tend to encounter tremendous forces of inertia that prevent us from achieving our goals. Of course, there is a lot of help available. There is no lack of great teachings, especially in this modern age. At the click of a mouse, we can access the wealth of nearly any tradition. We can view the latest scientific research on so many subjects. It's the age of information, yet information can only do so much to help us. Daajii laughed and said, I am reminded of an old couplet. Worms ate up thousands of books, but did not receive a certificate of erudition. That's what a bookworm is. No matter how much knowledge they gain, it doesn't make them any wiser. Knowledge cannot change us, you see. For example, we all know that patience is a virtue. But is knowledge enough to make us patient? Similarly, we all know the value of love. The great teachers of the world have all spoken of it. However, to know about love and to feel and express it are entirely different matters. What do we learn from this? If teachings alone were sufficient, we would all be transformed by now. After all, Many great personalities have come before us and left great teachings behind.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?